Hey everyone, my guest today is Nathan Smolensky. Nathan is an author, political strategist, and consultant from the Miami area who served as state director of the Florida Forward Party from 2022 through 2024. His new book, Common Ground from the Ground Up, explores healthier political communication as a means of self-improvement, and he's on a mission to empower readers to break out of their bubbles to become the best communicators they can be. Welcome, Nate. I am wondering what inspired you to write your book, and if you could kind of tell us a little bit about it.
So, my book, Common Ground from the Ground Up, comes from quite a bit of time that I've spent around the bridging and political innovation spaces, realizing not only is there a need for better conversation, healthier conversation from a moral standpoint, from sort of, man, it would be so much better, it would be so much nicer. But I realized there was this shared challenge that we all had. And I kind of came to understand this in the context of my own interaction with politics, where the way that I was talking about things, the way that I was trying to appeal people to engage in whatever group I was with, whether it was with the Forward Party, whether it was with any other independent minded effort, it's a lot of that same kind of appeal to energize rather than to persuade. And it's the way we're used to hearing about politics, so the way we're used to politicians and media talking about politics, because it works for them.
Mhm.
They never really have to deal with the general audience. They just cater to their choir. And the problem is when we emulate that, we end up getting stuck in our own bubbles. And I realized there was an appeal to be made that a more constructive approach to dialogue isn't just the nicer or the morally right way to go about things. It's also a much more effective way to reach those who may not agree with you, to get through and to become the best communicator, the most effective communicator that you can be, and to become the most effective contributor of your voice to the democracy that you can be. So, one of the ways I like to present the angling of the book is rather than say, hey guys, let's not fight about politics, this isn't worth fighting about, I sort of acknowledge that's not a point I'm going to convince anyone of,
Mhm.
most likely. These are important issues. These are critical issues that we have on the line with very high stakes. They may well be worth fighting over, but the fighting doesn't accomplish anything. And actually engaging in the dialogue does.
Yeah. Um, so what are some tips that you would have for energizing instead of persuading?
Well, that's what I'm saying is sort of the old way of going about politics, the
Oh,
way
okay.
that I wanted
Yeah.
to move away from, because that ends up limiting you to the choir. It
Yeah.
ends up where a lot of the ways that we're used to presenting a political idea is with a moral assertion.
Okay.
And, it might be healthcare is a human right. Um, it might be life begins at conception. It might be whatever else it is.
Mhm.
But if we step back and think about it, all that kind of framing does is it shows people what team we're on. It
Okay.
shows, I care a lot about this. It doesn't really work when people aren't inclined to already agree with that.
Yeah.
And when we don't share that kind of basis and that foundation, we need to have a much more thoughtful approach, a more analytical approach. It can help.
Mhm.
And I talk about different conversational techniques where you can steer it towards policy lens and understand the more analytical way of looking at it. But it really begins with just having a curious and open mind and realizing that you can benefit so much from learning from others. And
Yeah.
that is the backbone of healthier and more effective political discourse as I see it.
Right. Yeah, I guess when I was thinking of persuade, I was thinking more
Mm.
like manipulate, and because I when I was in school for political science, they my degree has a focus on environmental science, and they
Yeah.
basically teach you to almost manipulate or make someone else's life harder so that they'll agree with you on certain things. But yeah, there's obviously a difference between persuading and manipulating. You want to
Yeah, I
persuading
mean, to
is more honest.
persuade, yeah, and the phrasing, the definition that you go by obviously matters a lot.
Mhm.
For me, and what I talk mostly about the book is the idea of persuading being having people open their mind to what it is you have to say and what it is you have to offer. And it's
Yeah,
that golden rule application that I talk about a lot there, which is if you want people to open their mind to what it is you have to say, the best thing, the most effective thing that you can do is to open your mind to what it is they have to say. And
yeah,
starting by listening, starting by genuinely showing interest out of genuine interest in what it is they have to offer, even if the person starts out ranting, more often than you would expect, after a little while starts to quiet down, slow down, and they'll turn and say, "Well, what do you think?" And if you have the tools to navigate that conversation, that can be a lot more effective
hmm
at just sharing your view with others and making them think about it
yeah,
than just yelling it at them.
yeah. Yeah, I I was talking to someone else recently and we are talking about the right versus left and the tribalism.
Sure.
But I think if people were actually to sit down and be reasonable with each other, patient and actually listen, you'd find that they actually have a lot more in common with each other. They're maybe more towards the middle than one would think. I think there's probably a lot more people that are more so towards the, not just like far right and far left.
Sure, sure. And the tribalism, again, it's not just a negative in itself, it holds us back. We could
Mhm.
be having much more constructive conversations with one another, and we sometimes don't see that as a possibility, even.
Yeah.
As far as how much we have to agree on, yeah, there's more than people realize. And especially when you start to factor in all those voices who get tuned out of politics or discouraged from talking about politics, there's a lot more of a complex view of things
Mhm.
and a lot more acknowledgement that issues are complicated. But even when you have that disagreement, when I talk about common ground, it's not the things we agree on as the common ground. It is our ability to disagree on things. It's the
Mhm.
language and the sort of basis on which we have the disagreement. The disagreement is why we have conversations in the first place. The disagreement is why we have the democracy, is to incorporate different perspectives and to be able to challenge one another. And I think there's value in that, and there's beauty in what I talk about as the additive conversation, which is to say, look, these ideas that we each have, when we break it down, they're not necessarily in competition with one another. They all
Mhm.
inform the solution, they all inform what we need to be doing. If you say corporations given excess power can wield that power, can abuse that power at the detriment of the common people, at the detriment of free enterprise. Yeah, that's true. There is that potential for error, that potential for abuse. And if you counter that with the government as a
Uh-huh.
regulating entity can abuse its power, misuse its power, become inefficient, wasteful, unwieldy, do that at the cost of the industry's ability to compete, at the cost of the consumer's ability to have affordable products. These are all things to add to the conversation, to consider
Mhm.
if we're trying to find policy that works. And it is a lot more nuanced than I think people assume from the outside because we're so entrenched in this constant fight about it that
Yeah.
doesn't really get us anywhere.
Yeah. I think a lot of times too, the big topics, the ones where there's the most people disagreeing, those are the ones that get discussed the most often. Whereas other
Mm.
issues almost almost get ignored at some point because it's like, I don't know, not as sensationalized, you think?
Well, yeah, there's sort of looking at politics as business, and I come from, I studied business, I studied marketing, and
Hmm.
I understand this perspective a little because of that.
Yeah.
It can kind of inform you because what the politicians are doing is they're trying to distinguish their brand. Any any appeal to an issue, if you're running for office, if you say anything that your opponent would agree with, that adds no value to you. That is not a reason for anyone to vote for you over your opponent. And because of that, it's just not something you talk about at all.
Hmm.
And so these more naturally common ground issues tend to get avoided. And the parties tend to focus a lot on the same things, the same talking points, because they distinguish, they energize, and then they remind people constantly this is, what separates us from the other side. This is
Yeah.
what makes us better. This is why you belong here and you need to vote for me over them. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's where the incentive points.
So, how did being a political strategist help you with writing this? And I'm really interested in what your work is like. To me it sounds fun.
It's it definitely can be when you are in the independent space, as I
Okay.
have been by and large. It can be a bit of a challenge. It can be a little bit of an uphill battle.
Yeah.
Um, but it's dealing with the right and left. It's an uphill battle both ways.
Hmm.
So what I'm saying with that, I guess, is it has definitely shown me the challenges. And the challenges specifically that come with trying to bring a more positive politics into viable kind of electoral competition, or viably into electoral competition.
Hmm.
And there are things you have to be realistic about. There's also, I go back to the point of just how easy it is to fall into your own bubble, how easy it is to fall into that trap of talking about things in a way that can't really persuade anyone.
Hmm.
When we, or can't persuade anyone who doesn't already agree with you.
Yeah.
When we had talking points around depolarization, breaking the duopoly, these
Hmm.
things don't really mean anything to most of the population. They're almost coded words that
Yeah.
speak to our built in audience and make it very hard for us to grow our audience.
Hmm.
And being cognizant of that was really valuable. I also came to realize, sort of in the way that civility can be presented. If your calling card as a politician, and this is something I realized working with campaigns, if your calling card is just the way you do politics rather than the politics you do, you are sort of positioning yourself, or positioning that idea of civility against the issues. And that is where I think you will find a losing battle on the greater scale. Because, yes, people do care about positive messaging, people do care about politicians who do their work the right way,
Hmm.
about corruption, about all these meta issues. Do they care more about than do they care more about that than immigration, abortion, wars, the environment? No, not necessarily. And what you really don't want to do is ever kind of guilt people for
Hmm.
valuing these issues that are so dearly important to them over decorum.
Uh-huh.
And that's where I sort of realized that the greatest appeal that we can make, and for, or in defense of constructive dialogue, in defense of more positive politics, is to show that it can actually lead to better solutions. It can actually lead to better ideas. It can lead to, on the personal level, us being more effective communicators. It is
Hmm.
not for the sake of itself. And that, I think, was the key messaging breakthrough, the key strategic breakthrough that I came to in my political work that I applied here.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I had a question on the Forward Party. Can you tell
Yes.
me about that a little bit?
Sure. So the Forward Party is the Florida Forward Party came from the
Uh-huh.
merger of three organizations. Um, it was the original Forward Party, which was founded by Andrew Yang, former
Okay.
Democratic, uh, what's the term, candidate for the nomination in the 2020 presidential cycle. Um, and he wanted to create a viable political alternative. Now, that was
Hmm.
a sentiment shared by the Renew America movement, which came from a lot of the sort of never Trump style conservatives, and the Serve America movement, which was more focused on a traditional centrist approach to politics.
Hmm.
And these all came together in search of, well, let's create a viable pathway to political competition and a vehicle to empower non-duopoly, so non-Republican, non-Democrat candidates to run and compete in their elections. That
Yeah.
was the idea of it. And so Florida Party was a state chapter that became an official party. So the National Party is not technically a party. It is working toward that status. But the Florida Party does have that status. People can
Hmm.
register with it. And functionally, mechanically, what we did is we endorsed and supported, did our best to support a variety of candidates,
Hmm.
actually with different political leanings of their own. As logistically, it was very hard for us to focus only on forward registered candidates.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it was just us trying to empower new voices in the political environment and in the
Yeah.
political arena.
Do you think that it, I mean, this might be kind of an easy answer, but do you think that there that people are tired of your standard politicians and that moving forward there are going to be more people not necessarily like Donald Trump in character, but like Donald Trump in that it's someone who didn't wasn't into politics, maybe a little bit here and there, but wasn't an actual politician. Do you think we'll see more candidates like that?
The outsider, so are you saying sort of the outsider
Hmm.
who responds specifically to fatigue around politics?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, I think there is certainly fertile ground for that. I think Trump himself has a big impact on the way that people will read into, different outsiders coming in. I think
Hmm.
if you can get to a crying wolf aspect with a lot of more specific messaging,
Hmm.
if if you have another cycle of that same approach of the system's corrupt, we got to drain the swamp, people aren't going to react to that the way they reacted to that the first time around.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the fatigue around politics, and this is the critical market opportunity that we have, that any kind of independent movement or that any kind of movement toward empowering new voices in politics has to realize, and has to realize
Hmm.
how to navigate around. But it can be tricky because it's one thing to see, all right, 62% of Americans want to see a third party. When you're talking about a specific third party, then suddenly that sentiment shifts pretty
Hmm.
rapidly. Um, and yeah, you have to understand, and this is something I explore a little in the book, is all right, how do you meet that market opportunity with something viable, with something that can work enough within the system itself
Hmm.
that you don't have to wait on these massive structural shifts um,
Yeah.
for anything to change.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point because I know a lot of people are wanting I mean, I would like to have every party have the platform that Democrats and Republicans have. But yes, if you wanted to create a really strong third party, it would be hard to find people who had a solid had similar views enough to get enough support, because a lot of people are like, well, I like this, but I like this, on different.
And yeah,
Yeah.
I'll echo that, and I'll go even further with it. When you talk about the sort of the untapped political potential, that
Hmm.
sort of those voices in the independent space or in this weird cloud in the middle,
Hmm.
one of the distinguishing characteristics, and this is something I've seen as a strategist, something I've seen as an organizer, these are people who think outside the box. These are people who don't really care to conform to a very rigid line of thinking. And the way that you corral and bring together these outside the box thinkers is not by creating a new box.
Okay.
And that is kind of, I think, the fundamental limitation of what we're used to seeing in the third party
Hmm.
space. It's kind of these niche ideologies that are just as top down. You're never going to have that kind of growth within the Libertarian Party, within the Green Party, within, they have their places where they can compete viably, but
Hmm.
by and large, if you're talking about national credibility, it's a very difficult way to go about that path. And on the flip side of that, I think where we have a lot of promise right now is just in independence running. Um, and specifically in independence running in a lot of lopsided districts, which most districts are.
Hmm.
And I'll give a couple of examples. 2022, Utah senatorial campaign, Evan McMullin ran against a Republican. There was no Democratic candidate in the general election,
Okay.
and McMullin outperformed the Democrats from previous years and got 44% of the vote. The next cycle, we had Dan Osborne, and this was just last year, running in Nebraska. Again,
Hmm.
independent positioning against a Republican, and you can do this against Democrats as well. He got 48% of the vote. Not only is that really, really close to succeeding, it's also
Yeah.
outperforming, again, where the Democrats could have been in that situation. And I got this question a lot in Florida. Does Florida really need a third party? And the answer to that is no. Florida needs a second party. We don't have real credible political competition now. We don't have real voter choice. And
Hmm.
so rather than play into the stigma of this spoiler candidate, there is so there's so much fertile ground for independents to position themselves against otherwise unchallenged partisan rule. And through
Uh-huh.
doing so, not only create a more viable path for themselves, not only create a more viable path, a mechanism by which you can challenge the Democrats in California or these big city machines or the
Hmm.
Republicans in Mississippi and Alabama or this and that, but by creating this faction within the elected governance and the elected Congress, you can really, really shift the incentives. Because once you start to deny either party a majority, it's less about being in power and strong arming than it is, well, okay, we have to bring our ideas to the table and work together to get stuff done. And
Right.
that's where I think the greatest promise lies.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have any predictions for the 2026 election?
Well, I've got a few people I'm working with. I'm not going to go too deep into that at this
Okay.
moment. But one of the things I like to say is I don't really like to predict so much.
Yeah.
Um, and the the intro to my book is the case
Hmm.
against despair. That we have this hopelessness where we approach politics because we assume it can only be one way and it only
Hmm.
sounds one way. And that is something that we need to overcome. And that is something that holds us back. Um, the conclusion of my book is the case against optimism. Because if
Okay.
you come away with these techniques and these ideas, thinking, all right, everything's going to be great, then you sort of start to take it as a foregone conclusion. And that's not my
Mhm.
point. The point is we can do something about it. The point is the 2026 election hasn't happened yet. And the way that sentiment develops, the way that attitudes can shift and
Mhm.
ideas can change, can happen in this, incredible technological environment that we have faster than we think. And we can have more of an impact on it with the right tools than we might imagine. So it may depend on us. It may depend on a lot of your listeners out there, a lot of my readers out there. We can have an impact. We can have something to say yet about the 2026 election.
Mhm.
And so, no prediction, but yeah, it comes down to us.
Yeah.
I'll say.
How would you recommend people get involved in doing things like that?
I get involved specifically at the political
Yeah.
stage, at the
Yeah, or even in interacting with other people, maybe to open up conversations with people around you. Yeah.
focus on the in person. I would say
Okay.
social media is also not conducive
Yeah.
to healthy political discourse by its
Mhm.
nature. It's very
Mhm.
difficult to force there for a range of reasons. Talk to
Yeah.
the people who are close to you. These are, and going back to, yeah, you may be justified, and you may be justified in not wanting to have a relationship with someone who strongly disagrees with you. And what do you really gain by avoiding that? And trying to have that open mind, trying to have that conversation where you aim to learn rather than to win against each
Mhm.
other can lend itself to a lot that you might not expect, to some growth and some learning that you may not realize was possible. And it can heal relationships. It can make you a better communicator. And for those who are interested, yeah, it can make you a more effective and active participant within the democracy.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the beauty of that possibility, is the beauty of that hope, and is the beauty of, stopping short of the optimism of everything is foregone and realizing, no, your voice matters and you can
Mhm.
change where things are going. You can change things for the better.
Yeah. Do you get well, yeah, you should. You have conventions, right? Like county convention, district convention in Florida.
Yep. For forward or for, sorry,
Um
was
just just for like okay, so in Iowa we have the
sure,
Iowa caucus, and then when you're
sure.
at caucus they'll ask people if they want to be delegates to go to county district, and then you vote on the planks, which are basically
Mm.
ideas that people are going to run on, and then you move up to district, state, all the way to, so I'm assuming they do that in Florida as well, right?
They have some stuff like that. I think the parties do that within themselves. It's all
Mhm.
the ways that they make people, who are active within the parties feel involved
Yeah.
within that democratic process. I don't know it super well. And for anything like that, you have to have such a degree of scale
Uh-huh.
that, the minor parties don't really participate in it because it's
Right.
very logistically just not viable. Um, but yeah, I think, and this may not be exactly what you're asking, but those kinds of processes, those ways that you make people feel involved in the
Mhm.
democratic process, when you're running for something on the municipal level, when you're running for something like school board or this and that, the way that you engage with constituents, the way that you build up town halls or any kind of civic civic conferences, committees. There's a phrase, delegations. These are really important as to how you make people feel heard
Mhm.
and walking the walk with that. Any politician can say, I listen to my constituents, or I'm here for you. Giving spaces where people feel like their voice is making a difference
Hmm.
is in itself a big difference maker, and something that anyone who is trying to improve politics is very well served by emphasizing in their approach.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see how that would be difficult for someone who's in an independent party, like just gaining.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, I suppose talking to people around you and trying to get people engaged with your message would be a good start at least. Um yeah, it is hard. I wish there was a way for other parties to be able to get their word out there a little bit better, aside from social media, if there were more events or something like that people could start participating in. But
For sure, for sure. And, this can be part of the challenging thing, because also within that independent space, you just have people who either don't really want to spend that much time on politics, or
mhm,
who don't have that same fire that, your traditional partisan leaders have.
yeah,
And when you're competing on that axis, that's a very, very difficult battle to win. As the people who are most fervent in their views tend to have the most energy, tend to be willing to justify for themselves the greatest investment of time in their lives
mhm,
to their political causes. So
yeah,
how you overcome that? I think it really starts with creating smaller political environments, these conversations, these spaces where it's more enjoyable, where
mhm,
you can have an experience talking politics, thinking about politics, strategizing around politics that's more positive, that's more enjoyable. And I always say, or I used to say quite a bit, is if it gets to the point where you have to be crazy to want to get involved in politics, who do you think is going to get involved in politics?
yeah,
And
yeah, right.
I joke about that, but at the same time, like, this is one of the realities
Mhm,
is sort of all the fire caters to people who take it too far sometimes.
yeah,
And it can escalate dangerously.
yeah,
We've seen that.
yeah. It seems like a lot of politicians are turning into just like TikTokers or YouTubers. Where you get the most attention for outrageous behavior, and that outrageous behavior may be positive, but oftentimes I think it's negative. And
Yeah. And then even that negative, like from the politician's perspective, if it can provoke an even more negative response from the other side,
mhm,
then suddenly it looks good for you.
right.
It's
Yeah,
so,
negative attention is still attention.
oh no.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to tell you about my sponsors real quick. Sometimes I need a boost before my bike ride, but pounding an energy drink or coffee beforehand just isn't an option. What I love about Quantum Energy Squares is that they're made with 10 grams of plant protein and 100 milligrams of natural caffeine, equal to an 8-ounce cup of coffee. I get the boost I need without having to drink fluids that weigh me down or cause a pit stop during my ride. They have over 2,500 reviews with customers raving about their delicious flavors, like caramel almond sea salt and my favorite, dark chocolate pink Himalayan salt. My discount code gives you 25% off your entire order, and it's currently the best deal available. Just visit quantumsquares.com and enter in my promo code JADE, that's JADE, at checkout. Sometimes I get on a roll cleaning or gardening, and I need a boost but don't have time for a meal. Big Fork Brand's pork jerky is the perfect choice to keep my momentum, offering high-protein snacks for on-the-go energy boosts. Not only do they offer pork jerky, but they also make pork sticks, bacon sausage, bacon hot dogs, and burger and hot dog sauces. Products come in a variety of delicious flavors, including Thai green curry and maple and brown sugar for the meat options, and gangster and Chicago fire for the sauces. I personally think the original flavor of the pork jerky hits just right after tackling a big chore. It's a little salty and very flavorful. My discount code gives you 20% off your entire order, and it's currently the best deal available. Just visit bigforkbrands.com and enter in my promo code JADE, that's JADE, at checkout. Are you looking for a gift for a music lover, or maybe some apparel to show off your quirky side? Old Glory has you covered. With over 300,000 officially licensed items covering music, sports, entertainment, and pop culture, you're guaranteed to find the perfect item. They even have seasonal gear. My husband enjoys the Beatles and Led Zeppelin apparel, and I love the Billy Idol apparel. I even found items for my fellow plant enthusiasts. This family-owned superstore is known for their quality and customer service, offers free standard shipping on all orders, and orders are shipped the same day you purchase. My discount code gives you 15% off your entire order, and it's currently the best deal available. Just visit oldglory.com and enter in my promo code JADE, that's JADE, at checkout. Oh, yeah. So, to me, it kind of sounds like some of the stuff that's in your book it doesn't have to be just applied for politics. It sounds like it could be applied for business or anything where you're talking to someone with a differing opinion, and it doesn't have to necessarily be political. Is that a correct assumption?
Absolutely, absolutely. Politics is the area where we struggle the most,
Hmm.
I think,
Yeah.
in dealing with disagreement. But as far as, yeah, just opening your mind to things, incorporating different perspectives, interacting with different perspectives, a lot of the lenses, a lot of the elements of language, and taking that big picture or analytical viewpoint are very valuable. And I'll also say that, as well as being applicable to realms other than politics, it's also something where I tried to borrow at times from realms other than politics because they're um, more predisposed to understanding the common goal, more
Hmm.
predisposed to taking on that more collaborative approach rather than a competitive one. Within a business team, for example, there is an understanding, at least at base value, um, that you are all working toward the same thing.
Hmm.
And it helps to put your ego aside and understand how you can incorporate feedback in search of the best solutions. That is something that works there and that works better in politics than we take it for. One of the biggest points, as far as setting yourself up for this common ground approach, setting yourself up for a collaborative look, it's a line that comes from the world of relationship counseling, which is it's not you against your partner, this case,
Hmm.
your partner in conversation. It's both of you working against the problem. And when you realize it in those terms, it allows you to take on that disagreement in a completely new light. Rather than a personal challenge to yourself, it is something that you are working together to overcome.
Hmm.
And working together to understand. And you will still disagree on things at the end of the day, but
Yeah.
you will understand how your disagreement and your varied perspective can lend itself to better understanding and better problem solving as a team.
Hmm.
I'll also cite one non-political example in my life, um, and that is sort of understanding my personality and realizing, all right, well, I'm adaptable, I'm easygoing, I tend to be on the more polite side,
Hmm.
just in dealing with others. I have a great aunt who is the polar opposite of that. She
Yeah.
is fiery. If she doesn't like something, she will let you know about it. She's rather impatient.
Uh-huh.
But, I my family is Soviet immigrants. It's very hard to
Okay.
leave the Soviet Union. They left in the early 1980s, or they tried to leave in the late 70s. They had to wait and fight for it somewhat. And
Hmm.
where was that push to leave coming from? It was coming from my great aunt. It was coming from her not being complacent, not being
Yeah.
adaptable, and saying, no, I'm not going to settle for this. We need to get out. And in turn in my life, just appreciating how much this completely different perspective added to my own life, how much I owe to that,
Hmm.
is is a baseline for me realizing that I have so much to learn from others. I have so much to gain from hearing other perspectives. Doesn't mean I need to change how I am, because I
Yeah.
can share my voice too, and they can gain from hearing from me. And there are times when, you know, seeing my perspective is the thing they need to sort of to calm down and to,
Hmm.
to get themselves geared towards the most effective way of moving forward. But just gaining that kind of intellectual humility of, your idea, your way of looking at things is not going to always yield the truth. It's not going to always yield the best approach. I think that's a
Yeah.
real building block for any kind of conversation and an appreciation for interacting with others and learning from others that I think is really, really critical.
Yeah. While you were describing that, your great aunt was reminding me of myself, and my husband's more like you, more, you know, patient. He calms me down, but I can fire him up if it's like, all right, well, this, we need a little bit more action on something, or whatever. So
I mean, it's the
it's
old
really good.
adage, opposites attract.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you complement each other, there is such a beauty in, in that kind of dynamic
Yeah.
when you are there to have this perspective to bounce off of and this way of looking at things to bounce off of. I think that's just so incredibly powerful at dealing with all of the things life throws at you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something we sometimes lose our appreciation for when we're immersed in, our way is the right way, and any
Yeah.
disagreement is a call to arms.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, if I want somebody to agree with me, I'll just talk to one of my friends. But then it's like, all right, if I want to, not that they can't think critically, I'm not saying that, but if I want to maybe, okay, well, let's approach this from a different way, then I talk to my husband. But sometimes I gotta complain to my friends first and have them back me up, and then it's like, okay, all right, now let's calm down and you know whatever life issues there may be, which aren't many for me, but
No, and at the same time, I'm sure he appreciates very much having someone who is going to encourage him to speak up, who is going
mhm,
to encourage him to not be complacent. And, this is
yeah,
a kind of dynamic I'm very familiar with on a personal level,
mhm,
where, you kind of need someone who is going to bias towards action, is going to bias toward, well, let's be more selective. Let's
mhm,
put our foot in the ground here, and yeah, I think just being able to understand that you can gain so much from a different perspective
yeah,
is really, really critically important.
yeah. Yeah, and to circle back to the political climate,
Sure.
so we've just basically talked about how those different personalities being able to come together can make people understand each other a little bit better if we're able to work as a team instead of against each other.
Yeah. And that applies both in sort of our conversation, the way
Hmm.
that our philosophies meet. It's just a kind of more liberal outlook and a more conservative outlook can really complement each other if you
Hmm.
understand the mechanisms for actually working that additive conversation, um, where you will challenge each other and you will find issues that the other may not have a keen eye on. At the
Hmm.
same time, within our broader political conversation, within our broader discourse, there's a lot of fiery voices. And while we need that action, while we need that call to urgency at times,
Hmm.
um, we kind of also need, as paradoxical as it may seem, the quieter voices to
Yeah.
speak up a little and to call attention to when, that action can come in excess, when that action and that fire can undermine us.
Mhm.
And that's, both of those I think are valuable to encourage, because I we talk about intellectual humility. We've talked about intellectual humility. I think that comes hand in hand. We see a lot of those people talking about politics who struggle with intellectual humility.
Mhm.
There's also a lot of people out there who have too much intellectual humility and who struggle with confidence that their
Uh-huh.
voice can add to the conversation.
Yeah.
And these are both people that I feel can benefit from the book and can benefit from techniques for better discourse.
Mhm.
And to that latter audience, these are a lot of people who may have doubts and may have things that confuse them about
Mhm.
how those around them are talking politics, and may not realize, hey, if you present your hesitation constructively, people can learn a lot from that. If
Mhm.
something's not resonating with you, then whoever is putting that message out can gain as a messenger by learning from you and by learning what it is that you are not responding to as well.
Yeah.
And that in turn, like, your ideas, even if they are not fully formed, even if it's just one piece of the puzzle, you don't have to have the full answer.
Mhm.
Your perspective, because it's not on any single one of us to find the answer. It is
Yeah.
our perspectives adding to painting the picture as clearly as we can, so that we understand where the greatest solutions may lie.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are afraid to ask questions as well. And, they also, I think that if you're in a group of people and you ask a question, there might be other people wondering the same thing. And it can just only open up more understanding if you actually just take the time to say, like, well, what do you mean by that? Or like, oh, I actually, or, sometimes people don't want to admit that if they don't know something about a topic and they'll just go on, oh, yeah, yeah, no, actually ask about it and learn a little bit about it. And I mean, I know you could be afraid of looking like dumb or uninformed, but you know, you're you're only making yourself uninformed if you're not asking the questions. And I guess if you're around people who are upset with you for asking or treating you like you're dumb for asking, then they're probably not the people that you want to be around.
They're not, but this also holds them back. Because
Mhm.
if we approach politics and discussion around politics as constantly competitive debate, it's something that has to be won or lost. It doesn't lead us anywhere, and it makes us really terrible at actually encouraging others
Mhm.
to consider what it is we have to say. So, yes, it is that environment, and you do need to either go to a more welcoming environment or forge the more welcoming environment by
Mhm.
appealing to, again, those who engage in that, those who uh, engage in this hyper aggressive competitive politics are holding themselves back. You can appeal to that. Either way, um, it starts with having that more collaborative approach,
Mhm.
and then coming in to learn from each other. And that's where, no matter what you believe, um, yeah, you can gain from the discussion, no matter how unsure you are, no matter what you're undecided on.
Mhm.
You can still both gain from hearing someone else and offer them something to gain from why it is you are uncertain and why it is you may be struggling to find your place and what resonates with you.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like the audience to know about your book?
Um, it is currently available for sale on Amazon.
Mhm.
I think that's very important for the audience to know. Um,
Yes.
but beyond that, yeah, I guess I talk about the sort of the origins of our division and
Mhm.
how hard it is to break through our own bubbles. I
Yeah.
talk about the ways we can rethink politics and rethink our political identity, how we approach the issues, how we approach conversation.
Hmm.
I have a bunch of sort of conversational techniques, more specific things of frameworks to deal with disagreement. I have all
Okay.
the ways that you can apply it in your life, in your daily life, and then I have this sort of political applications.
Yeah.
Um, and then I have a few bonus essays where I maybe share a little about myself. And
Okay.
so, yeah, there's fun to be had. And
Yeah.
I'll,
Is this? I mean, you seem pretty easygoing. I- is this more of a not a fun read, but like I feel like this can help the audience, but also not something that would weigh the reader down.
absolutely.
Is
And
that?
that's part of part of my challenge and part of what I felt was my goal coming into it is I
Hmm.
want something that's accessible. I want
Yeah.
something not only for people who are in the bridging space or inclined toward looking at independent politics or this or that, um, but something that they can pass on to those who really could benefit from a more positive approach to discourse, um, any from techniques for more constructive dialogue. And part of that accessibility, first of all, I ain't got the time to write 1,000-page book on this,
Yeah.
and it's going to be a lot harder for people to read that. I
Hmm.
tried to make it somewhat light. I'll admit fully, I tried to make it somewhat skimmable. There's
Okay.
highlighted points throughout.
Yeah.
Sort of the order is less abstract. As much as I admire these non-linear storytellers, this is not the
Hmm.
place to do that. And I want it to be easy enough to follow, easy enough to engage with,
Hmm.
clear enough, not again, practicing what I preach, not to entrench myself in this dialogue of depolarization or this vocabulary of depolarization or this and that, but to,
Uh-huh.
have this wider appeal. And yeah, to make it a little more positive and to make it oriented toward solving the problems, solving the
Yeah.
problems that we face as a society, solving the problems of ourselves wanting to be the most effective communicators we can be,
Hmm.
solving the problem of ourselves wanting to be the most active and effective participants in the democratic process that we can be,
Yeah.
rather than trying to solve the problem of division, because that is not necessarily top of mind or
Hmm.
the greatest concern for everyone. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it because there's always going to be division, but if you can work on yourself and how you communicate with others, really that's the best thing that you can do because a lot of that's out of your control.
Yeah, and overcoming the alienation, overcoming our inability to disagree,
Hmm.
because we should disagree. We need to disagree. This is why these conversations are worthwhile. Again,
Yeah.
doing that is not just a worthy goal in itself. Doing that is our means to finding the best solutions for everything else and
Hmm.
to making our voices heard, to forging the best future that we can. The one last message
Yeah.
is just to go along with, this is a call for a better discourse as a means of better problem solving, more effective communication.
Hmm.
The proof for that is in the pudding. And
Yeah.
that comes both at the political level, where I think the onus is upon, more independent minded candidates to
Hmm.
show the ideas that they are empowered to
Yeah.
come upon and the solutions that they are empowered to come upon as better solutions to the pertinent problems of our time. And it applies on the personal level. Those who adopt these tools and who become in turn more effective communicators, who are able to enjoy a more productive, a healthier, and just a more effective or a
Hmm.
more enjoyable means of political communication, that is where the crux of my appeal lies. So I need to hear from those people, those readers, those
Yeah.
listeners who are able to adapt to the or adopt these and reap the benefits, because ultimately that is the showcase, that is the evidence for
Hmm.
you know the power of any of these tools and any of these techniques.
Yeah. Are you engaging with people on social media at all?
A little bit, a little bit.
Yeah.
Social media, as I mentioned before, it is a little more inclined
Hmm.
to a, a more divisive politics. I will post
Yeah.
about things. Oftentimes, the responses I get are positive, which on some
Good.
level is great, but on another level, you will not be able to get quite the same depth of conversation there.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, one of the places where I do encourage people to reach out. So I've got my website, nathансmolensky.com. People can message me there.
Yeah.
And then I do events, I do signings, and just any kind of interaction there, I very much look forward to, because the best stuff is in person. The best stuff is
Yeah.
these conversations. And if you happen to find me at one of those and you want
Yeah.
to push back or you're unsure about something, I gain so much from hearing that. And I
Yeah.
appreciate that so much.
And you're in the Miami area, correct?
I am in the Miami area. I try to travel
Yeah.
uh,
Awesome.
for this.
Okay.
So
Well, thank you for coming on the show today. I think
thank
that,
you for having me.
yeah, I'm trying to find more things to where we can tone down the hate, but that's embedded into politics. And I think that your book is a great example.
Thank you.
So, all right.
No,
Awesome.
I very much appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I will talk to you soon.
All right. Talk to
All
you
right.
soon.